Hi and welcome to the video. I have two lenses here with me that are very interested for wildlife and especially bird photographers, because both of these lenses offer 600mm of focal length with a maximum aperture of 6.3. However, there are also quite some pronounced differences between the lenses. This here is the Z180-600mm f5.6 to 6.3 from Nikon, and as the name says, it's a zoom lens offering a wide zoom range, a lot of flexibility. On the other hand, here we have the Z600mm f6.3 PF lens. So it's a prime lens, and as you know, prime lenses have usually a bit better image quality than zoom lenses, better autofocus, they deal better with teleconverters, and as you maybe already see, this one is a bit more compact and it's much lighter than the Z180-600. On the other hand, it also costs almost 3 times as much as the Z180-600. So the question is this extra cost and the loss of this flexibility of not having a zoom with this prime lens, is it worth it? Are the benefits that you get enough? I was using both of these lenses quite extensively. I shot over 10,000 with each of them. I tried to do some side-by-side comparison without and with tele-extenders out in the field. I also did some studio tests to look at image quality. I did some autofocus tests, image stabilization, and so on. And in this video I want to talk about exactly this, and also some maybe a bit more hidden things that not everybody looks at, about the focal length, about tele-extenders and more. So let's start with the differences in the specifications and how they handle out in the field. As you can already see here, the Z180-600mm is a bit longer. It's 31.6 centimeters long. This one here is 28 centimeters long. The diameter is very similar. We have here 11 centimeters, here 10.7, and both of them take a 95mm filter. This is obviously a prime lens. Here we have a zoom lens, but it's an internal zoom, meaning if I change the focal length here, there is no tubus that is extending. It stays exactly the same length at all times. If I lift both of the lenses up, I feel quite a difference in weight. This one here, without the tripod collar, it's 1.955 kilograms. With the tripod collar, it's 2.14 kilograms. This one here, it's 1.39 kilograms without the tripod collar and 1.47 with the tripod collar, or I should say the tripod foot, because that's also a difference that I want to mention here. This one has a more traditional tripod collar, so if I want to get rid of this, I can loosen this screw here and get rid of this whole collar. I will attach it again. Whereas here you can just take off the foot itself, so this is something we see more from super telephoto lenses. This comes off, but the rest stays on the lens. I didn't use my tripod a lot when shooting either of these lenses, but still you can feel a difference in how the tripod collar or tripod foot works. So if I open here the screw, it doesn't matter so much if I open it by just a quarter of a turn or, well, almost 2 turns, that's the maximum. It always goes kind of smooth, but still with a tiny bit of resistance, so just in a nice way. Whereas here you have one screw for both opening, that you can move the foot around so that you can change from vertical to horizontal shooting or the other way around. And it's also the same screw to completely loosen the tripod collar and take it off. So if you just turn it by half a turn or even 1 turn, it doesn't really move nicely. If you over loosen it, you can feel that it's a bit wobbling and not so stable anymore. There is no danger that you could just fall off, don't worry. But it's just not the same smooth experience as here. Another important difference is the minimum focus distance between the two lenses. Here it's a variable one, so with 180mm we have a minimum focus distance of 1.3 meters. With 600mm it's 2.4 meters, and here it's always 4 meters. And as you might have already guessed, this results in a different magnification, a maximum magnification ratio. So at the minimum focus distance here, you can get a magnification of up to 1 to 4, so 0.25. And here it's 1 to 6.7, so 0.15. So for close-up subjects like butterflies, dragonflies, amphibians, this one has an advantage. Also very important is the difference in price. This one is around 2,000 euros or $1,700. This one is around 5,800 euros. Depending a bit where you live, this means that this one is basically 3 times as expensive as this one. The Z600mm PF is an S-line lens, the 180-600 is not. However, both are to a certain degree sealed against weather impacts like dust or some splash water. We can see a difference not only in the golden ring here, but also that this one has a lens function 1 button. This one here only has the lens functions 2 button in front. I need to say I find the lens functions 2 buttons, the one in front, much more useful in practice because this one I cannot reach when I'm shooting. Another difference you will see is that this one has the memory set button, and this one I really used and was happy to use also in the field sometimes. And for this one we have a dedicated control ring where you can put ISO, exposure compensation, whatever you want. This one looks like it has one, but this is actually also the focus ring, and I would not give up the ability to manually focus for a control function, if you get what I mean. So I always kept this on focus, meaning I don't have a control ring. Also something I didn't use, so to be honest I didn't care so much. When I was taking pictures out in the field, I wanted to do some side-by-side comparison, so I switched from one lens to the other and back, and I noticed some quite big difference. First of all, the weight. This one is so much lighter, and to be honest, it's just more fun to shoot with a lightweight lens. I'm sure if you have used a heavy and a light lens in the past, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It also makes it easier if you quickly need to switch to a different position. This could be because a bird just landed somewhere, or you're shooting flying birds. It's just so much easier with this lens. If you're in a bit weird position, like I sometimes do when I'm shooting waterfowl and I'm using the rotatable screen and I hold the camera down, or sometimes I need to have a higher perspective. This is more for songbirds that are a bit hidden behind some branches. I shoot with an overhead position, and there of course it's so much easier to shoot with the light 600 PF. And it also means that in some situations with this one I can get the shot, whereas here I would miss it because I cannot just not hold it so well. Also, if you shoot over a long time, maybe you are waiting for a bird to take off, you are waiting for action to happen, you also feel the difference quite a lot. Of course, the Z180-600mm also has its advantages. For me, the main one being that it's a zoom lens. So you have this flexibility, you can change the framing quite a lot. So on one day I was at a river, I was taking some pictures of swans, and I was at 600mm, so I was going for portrait, and then I realized that I have the 180-600, so I zoomed out and got some shots with the whole bird on it. There I just want to mention that at 180mm you have an aperture of f5.6, which is not a very large aperture, so the background will not be so blurry. It will look completely different if you just zoom into 600mm. Why do I say this? Because I think often you can also overrate this zoom. Sometimes I zoom out and actually think, but it doesn't look so good because the background now is a bit distracting. So in the end I noticed that for bird photography I was mostly using this lens between 500 and 600mm. If I would have gone to a different trip and went for ibex, I would maybe have used it more in the lower end, so this depends a bit what you shoot. And if you come from an older lens that you want to upgrade, let's say you have an older 150-600mm lens, then maybe go to your Lightroom, Capture One or whatever, select the best pictures that you have, and then see how many you took with them in the range of maybe 500-600mm and 300-500 and maybe 150-300, and then you will get an idea how much you would miss a zoom if you would go for this one. So let's compare the image quality of these lenses. And before I talk about my experiences out in the field, I want to have a look at a more studio test where I took some pictures of this toucan on a distance of 7.5 to 8 meters from the tripod with a timer release so that there is no vibration and so on. And you can see here the first shot, both lenses with 600mm. I zoom in the center at the largest possible aperture of f6.3, and we can see quite a difference, I would say. The Z600mm PF, the prime lens, is noticeably sharper. If you cannot see the differences so well here, then please look in my video description. I put a link to a Dropbox folder where you can have the comparison shots in a higher quality than with the YouTube compression here. So if we move to the edge of the frame, you can see I really put this toucan into the edge of the frame and we're still wide open at f6.3. And here you can see that the 180-600 is not as sharp, but it's not a huge difference. But you can also see that it somehow has a bit more vignetting. If we stop down and go back to the center, now both lenses are at f8. You can see that the gap closes a bit between the two lenses, but the Z600mm PF is still sharper. And if we move back to the edge of the frame, it's still a very similar picture. The difference is not huge, but still the PF lens is just sharper. I don't know about you, but for me, for bird photography, especially for these small birds, sometimes 600mm is just not enough. So I reach quite often for my 1.4 extender. So I added this to both of the lenses. So we get 840mm at f9. And if we look at the center of the image, we see a big difference. The Z600mm PF is much sharper. And if we move to the edge of the frame, it's a very similar picture. We just have so much more detail with the Z600mm PF lens. If again we stop down by 2/3 of a stop, so at f11, we see that the gap closes a bit, but it's still noticeably sharper in the Z600 PF picture. And if we move to the edge of the frame, the Z600mm PF is still sharper here. In some rare situations, even 840mm is not enough, so then you can add a 2x extender and you get 1200mm at f13. And if we now look at the center of the image of both shots, we see a big difference. The 180-600mm picture looks a bit blurry, a bit soft, and the Z600mm PF picture is still very sharp, has a lot of details, and I was really amazed about the image quality. If we move to the edge of the frame, it's a similar picture. Both lose a bit towards the edge, but the Z600mm PF is still much sharper. I didn't do another test with f16 because for me, if I do bird photography, this starts to be a very small aperture and I would not really use this in the field. And speaking of the field, what are my impressions there? So I need to say overall I was happy with the image quality of the 180-600, also when I tested it a few months ago, but it still didn't feel on a level of a prime lens. A prime lens just felt a bit sharper, a bit more consistent, and now that I had a Z600mm f6.3 as a direct comparison, this was exactly what I saw again. The images of the Z600mm 6.3 PF were just razor sharp, and most importantly they were more consistently sharp. The 180-600 still produced very nice results, but every now and then there were some pictures that were not as sharp as with the prime lens, and this was kind of more pronounced when I put the 1.4 extender, and even more with the 2-point extender to a point where I need to say I personally would not buy a 2x extender for the 180-600 because just from the times I used it, I had a lot of blurry shots that I needed to delete, and the keeper rate was really low. With the 600mm PF it was still fairly high. However, I want to mention, please don't use a tele extender for a deer that you want to shoot at 200-meter distance. I rather used it for some small songbirds that I had maybe at 20 meters, but this was just not, they were not big enough in the frame with 600mm, that's why I used the extender. So how does the autofocus perform on these two lenses? First of all, I want to say with both of them I didn't have a problem in this sense that there was some kind of focus hunting or anything. Nevertheless, I found that this one was a bit more stable, a bit more reliable. I had more keepers in one series of images, and it also focuses a bit faster than the Z180-600mm. This is especially relevant if either you have a small and fast-flying bird approaching you, or if you are maybe were shooting before at 40-50 meters distance and suddenly a small bird pops up like 6 meters in front of you and leaves soon after again, then of course the focus speed of this one is also an advantage. I tried to put them a bit into perspective and I compared it to my RF 600mm f4 and the RF 100-500mm. Unfortunately only on the R5, which doesn't focus as fast as an R3, but still The RF 600mm f4 was very similar, maybe a tad faster than this one, and a lot faster than this. However, I was not sure if a 600mm f4 is the perfect comparison, so I also compared it with the RF 100 to 500, and this one was significantly faster than both of them. But in practice, all of them were fast enough for what type of shooting I do. To visualize the differences a bit, I put some clips here. I hope you can see it nicely. Another point I wanted to mention is the effective focal length that you have and the maximum magnification. So a typical behavior of zoom lenses is the so-called focus breathing, and this means that if you shoot at a close distance, let's say at 4 or 5 meters, the effective focal length is not what is written on the lens. So I did a quick comparison. I shot at 4.5 meters, which is half a meter more than the minimum focus distance of this one. And if you look at the two pictures, you can see that the one of the 600 PF is just tighter, meaning it has a bigger magnification, and it seems like the 180 to 600 millimeter just has less focal length. Even though both were set at 600 millimeters, it effectively has less focal length than the 600 millimeter PF. And maybe you remember from the sharpness test with the Toucan before, that was at around 7.5 to 8 meters. I will show the pictures again here. You can still see a bit this difference, however it's far less pronounced. So does this mean if you want the biggest possible magnification, you should get the Z600mm PF? It depends. If your subject is like 4, 5, 6, 7 meters away, yes, this is the better lens. However, if you have the option to get closer than the minimum focus distance of this one, which is 4 meters, and you can maybe get up to 2.4 meters to focus the minimum focus distance of this one, then this one will give you the much bigger magnification. Remember, this was also in the specs about the maximum magnification, where this one has one of 1 to 6.7 and this of 1 to 4. So this one wins here, and again, I hope you can see this in this example where I shot the 600 PF at the minimum focus distance of this lens, which is 4 meters, and the 180 to 600 at the minimum focus distance of that lens, which is 2.4 meters. I don't really like to use a tripod too much in wildlife photography, so image stabilizer is very important for me. So I did a quick comparison tests, and when I did the first test, I thought maybe I was doing something wrong, because actually the 180 to 600 was performing better. And I would not have expected this because, first of all, this is an S-line lens, so I expected better image quality, and it's also lighter. However, I repeated the test and this one was still a tad better. So what you see here is an average of the two tests, 1/25 of a second at 600 millimeters. You can see if I turn the IS off or the VR, I get basically zero sharp images. If I turn it on the 600mm PF, around 50% of the images are okayish and 36% are really tag sharp. And with the 180 to 600mm, it was a similar amount of okayish images, but I had 45% of the images very sharp. I would not put too much importance into these numbers. This lens was still performing very well, and if you would say me, oh, which one would you pick for low light? I don't think that this matters for hand-holding capabilities. They are very close. For me, it just means that because this seems to have a bit a better image stabilizer, it can kind of compensate for the extra weight that it has. Finally, which of the two lenses should you buy? It highly depends on what you want to shoot. If you want to take a lot of pictures of more shy wildlife, especially maybe small birds, where you really need 600 millimeters or sometimes even 840 or 1200 millimeters, if you can afford it, really go for the 600 millimeter PF. It's sharper, much sharper, and it's also much lighter and in many ways more professional. If it's very important to you that the lens is rather lightweight and nicely hand-holdable, then totally go for the 600mm PF as well. The difference is huge. You really feel it if you handhold this one. If you want in general just to have the best image quality, again the 600mm PF is the clear winner. If on the other hand you want a lens that basically covers everything from 180 to 600 millimeters, obviously this is the best choice. If you want to take pictures of frog, amphibians, maybe shoot a lot in a local park where you can get very close to the subjects, closer than 3.5 meters or something, again this might be the better choice. And of course, if price is an important factor, this one is so much cheaper, then I would also go for this one and maybe spend some extra money that you have left rather on a nice photography trip. So you can see both lenses have their advantages and disadvantages, and no matter how you decide, I can guarantee you will have these moments where you wish you would have picked the other ones, but this is totally normal. I think overall I would just look what is more important to you of these factors that I just mentioned. Maybe go to Lightroom, capture one, see in which focal length in which focal range do you usually shoot. Is it more a mix between 200 and 600 millimeters, or is it really 99% of the cases between 500 and 600? This can also be quite an important factor to decide. I think no matter how you choose, you will be happy with the lens you choose. If you want to support me, you can always leave a super thanks, or if you think about picking up one of these lenses, I put affiliate links down below, and this would just support my channel. I hope you have fun out in nature taking pictures of wildlife, and see you in the next video.